would be a citizen of Gotham City. Not us, that's for sure. If we were unlucky enough to be born kicking and screaming in Elliott Memorial Hospital, we would first question the sanity of our parents for choosing to live there for so long, and then suggest that we relocate immediately, once we had the mental capacity to do so, of course. If the city's foreboding Gothic architecture wasn't creepy enough, then we should probably mention the abundance of crazed supervillains who regularly pay a visit. And not your ordinary run-of-the-mill villains, no, supervillains, an important distinction to make. And if you missed it earlier, we mentioned there's an abundance of them. Not one, not two, not even a handful. No, Gotham has an abundance, and yet people choose to live there, such as our fictional parents, in this case. So Gotham City wouldn't fare too well on TripAdvisor, but as a thriving hive of criminal activity surrounded by high-rise buildings and pulsing neon lights, few can argue that it's an idyllic locale for Batman to swoop, soar, and conquer as the rain crashes down. You'll be pleased to know that Batman Arkham Knight makes this dream a reality, and then some. We would never have expected that gliding, such a seemingly simple mechanic in the grand scheme of the game, would become one of our highlights of this generation in gaming. Listening to the comedic mutterings of the thugs below as Batman's cape flutters in the wind is truly a therapeutic experience, while diving headfirst off the top of skyscrapers promotes quite the opposite sensation. It's testament to the fantastic open world that developer Rocksteady has created, and makes traversing the concrete jungle of Gotham City an absolute pleasure, instead of a grating chore. But which sinister soul is responsible for causing havoc this time around? Well, it's that damn sack-wearing Scarecrow, and he's rudely interrupted everyone's Halloween celebrations in the process. A citywide evacuation is ordered as Scarecrow threatens to unleash a deadly toxin. However, this isn't Scarecrow's main objective. He's determined to reveal the true identity of Batman and finally show the citizens of Gotham that he is nothing but a man, dispelling the powerful mystique that his anonymity carries. What follows is a roller coaster ride of unexpected plot twists, grand reveals, and a much darker tone than we expected. It's all executed remarkably well and with a greater sense of conviction than the previous games managed to muster. The story kept us second-guessing all the way through, and despite a slight lull in the middle, it proved to be a satisfying finale to Rocksteady's impressive trilogy. But while the story may have all the ups and downs of a popular Spanish soap opera, sadly the same cannot be said for the game's numerous side missions. Even though there are plenty to discover, they ultimately fall short as they fail to evoke the same sort of emotion and gravitas as the game's main campaign. They're also fairly repetitive too, and a more cynical player could deem this as nothing more than a convoluted means to gain further upgrades and access the game's true ending, which is a shrewd move by Rocksteady, we must admit. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt recently proved that side missions can be more than just fillers, so it's disappointing that Rocksteady glossed over this area by choosing quantity over quality. Nevertheless, it's a useful tool for introducing more supervillains into the fray and expanding the game's fan service. Perhaps the biggest stumbling block Batman Arkham Knight faces is the danger of franchise fatigue. It's a genuine problem these days, and with Arkham Knight technically representing the fourth installment in nearly as many years, it's only natural that we see much of the same formula repeated, refined, and expanded upon slightly. There's still the same free-flow combat system in place, which holds up remarkably well, and the majority of gadgets function exactly how they did in Arkham Asylum. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, as they've always worked so well. Some may be less susceptible when it comes to retreading old ground, but it's worth bearing in mind that your enjoyment may vary if you ever felt like Batman was beginning to bore. That being said, Rocksteady have become masters of their craft, and have managed to create an incredibly seamless experience by banishing almost all loading screens, as cutscenes blend into gameplay without a moment's hesitation. They've also tried to shake up the formula by introducing a controversial new gameplay mechanic, the Batmobile, which is unfortunately bound to polarize players. A hulking tank of non-lethal destruction, the Batmobile has been heavily integrated into almost every element of Arkham Knight, and it comes at a cost. Although cruising around the city streets is undeniably fun, with scorching flames spitting out from the Batmobile's afterburners as you rip through obstacles and veer around corners, the decision to include Bruce's new car in riddles, puzzles, and tank-based combat can be sorta hit and miss. It works, there's no doubt about it, and ultimately our experience with the Batmobile was generally positive, but it doesn't take much imagination to envision the frustration this will cause for others. The sense of raw, unbridled performance the monstrous ride offers is tangible, and it definitely makes traversing Gotham City a more expeditious process. We also seem to be one of the few who actually enjoyed the tank-based combat, especially once we sought out a couple of worthy upgrades. Guess it kinda reminds us of an old PlayStation game called Cyber Sled, which admittedly was a bit naff, but hey, Nostalgia. It should not be understated that Batman Arkham Knight is the best Batman has ever looked, period. We'd also go as far as to say it's one of the most technically impressive games released on current-gen consoles to date, and we never grew tired of stepping into Batman's sizable shoes every time we booted up the game. Although we encountered a few graphical performance hiccups here and there, such as spotty physics and dips in the generally smooth frame rate, we were consistently wowed by the game's meticulous attention to detail, lavish textures, and fluid character animations. Of course, we're completely discounting the initially released PC version, as it later turned out to be an absolute train wreck. The PC port aside, Rocksteady did miraculous things with the Unreal Engine, but they've surpassed even our highest expectations with Arkham Knight. The same can be said about the game's cast of characters, who feel more convincing than ever. Voice acting is up there with the best, as infamous villains live up to their comic book counterparts with ease. As far as cinematic goes, you'd be hard-pressed to find such a slick and seamless experience. Arkham Knight features a procession of mentally unhinged madmen to tackle, a gorgeous recreation of Gotham City to explore, and is a fine conclusion to Rocksteady's excellent trilogy. If you can make peace with the Batmobile and disregard the game's tendency to overly rely on tried and tested mechanics, then you'd be a bat brain to miss out on this one.